Alright, here's a quick video on fuel tanks for the Ford Econoline, the do's and the don'ts. Okay? Number one, don't buy an aftermarket tank. This particular tank came from a particular store. I won't say the name, but it's going back. It's a $300 gas tank. It's not bad made, it's just subpar. It's lighter duty. Okay, it's a lighter gauge of metal. Okay, whether galvanized or not, it's a lighter tin. If I would knuckle that real hard, I could dent it. The original Ford tank, this is a junkyard tank. Here's the don't parts. Beware when you go to a junkyard to buy a tank or a salvage yard. First of all, you're not going to get it at a regular salvage yard without a hole punched in it, so you can forget that unless you want to put a plug in it. They'll sell it to you for 20 bucks. This tank was found anywhere between $400 and $60. Between $60 and $400. I paid $60 for this tank. Okay, so these are the do's and don'ts. The original tank is much stronger. Okay, the vents, they're standard. The sensor right here is optional. California models that take a sensor. The other ones just have a block off plug that's plastic with an O-ring. Okay? Most of them are California models. They have a vacuum tool or a different size engine. They would have a block off there. So it just depends. But they all have that third hole. So you got one hole, two hole, three holes, and then your fuel pump. Fuel line or fuel filler hose, 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches, roughly 10.5 to 11 inches long. 3/4 inch fuel line. Don't use don't use heater hose or it'll rot out on you. This is fuel grade fuel line. This was bought from O'Reilly's. I find the other places are more expensive and harder to get. This comes with a pre-bent 45-degree angle. You need that to go over the hump of the frame. And it sits about right. So you need less than a foot, or about there at a foot, and then you can cut to length. So we're going to cut this piece to length. So that gets rid of your accordion. So 1.5 inches, 3/4 inch for your standard 35-gallon fuel tank. This covers Econoline's 97 to 03. When you go above 03, you get into the locking ring. Some fuel pumps, depending on what kind of engine you have, and other technicalities like more pollution and smog control crap and all that stuff, you may have 3 lines on your fuel pump. Something to beware of. Here's another thing that might be helpful to you. Check these tanks very good at the junkyard or salvage yard or wherever you buy them from, because the first thing that happens is they pull the wheels off the vehicle and they let it drop to the ground. When they do, the tank gets dented in the bottom. The bottom of the tank gets pushed up. This is the 3rd or 4th or 5th. This is the 5th tank we were looking at, yeah. That we looked at. We took this tank because it had the least amount of damage on it.
Every single other one had a big gouge in the bottom.
Every one of them. And the gouge prevents you from putting the fuel pump in it. It also dislodges the tray. The tray we're going to talk about in a few minutes. This is like a sump tray, like a reservoir. You need that reservoir for such a long tank like this for when you're going up inclines and going down declines. And when you get low on fuel, when you get down to 1/4 of a tank of gas. Well, let me explain what this aftermarket tank was doing. I'll show you the differences in aftermarket versus factory. This aftermarket tank still got 1/4 of a tank of gas in it. Okay, that's about 8 to 10 gallons of a 35-gallon tank. You see this tray right here. This tray is like a sump. Can you get in there, cameraman? People see? You can see how that sump has been pop riveted or tack welded to the bottom. Okay, that tray, that fuel tray right there, when you accelerate with a low amount of fuel in it, it splashes to the back when you get down past a 1/4 of a tank. When it splashes to the back, it'll cause your fuel pump to suck air bubbles and it'll cause you to do a brief engine stall. It may not kill on you, but it's enough to get you in an accident if you're trying to pull out in traffic. So that's definitely a don't on this Canadian made. You can check the part number on this. This is your part number for your Canadian made gas tank. So, or again, I'm not saying where I bought this, but there's the part number. You can judge for yourself. The Ford has a plastic, more of an ABS type plastic.
Kind of taller than that
tray.
too.
It's very much taller than this. Come look, John, in here. It's much taller than this. So it's got one deck. That's only one deck right there. The Ford has a riveted deck that comes up another 2 inches, inch to 2 inches, and then it has like a mouse trap design, or a rat trap design, or box trap, where it lets fuel in and then fuel out at a slow pace, so that it can fill up and you can keep constant fuel to the fuel pump. Because this is such a flat, long gas tank that sits flat, you need that for a reason. So let that be a lesson to you that I learned the hard way. This tank, like I said, is going back as soon as we get the gas out of it. It's going back for a full refund because of that manufactured flaw design. The other fuel tank, like I said, it has that splash guard in it. I wish I wouldn't have put the fuel pump in. I would have showed you. Fuel pumps. You may need to know about fuel pumps. That's a Carter fuel pump, even though Carter's supposed to be made in the USA. Engineered. Well, this particular model.
Gotta pay attention to those words.
It's got Chinese written all over it. So this is a Chinese assembly. You can find this on eBay for $60. It works, but it's subpar. Okay? To my liking. The original pump that I had in here was a Bosch from Germany. New old stock. Can't find them anymore. I got 7-8 years out of that pump. And it's actually still going if I wouldn't have damaged it from damaging the gas tank that was in here before. It has a hole in the side of it. There's another video on YouTube, you can see that. This pump, your two best pumps right now in 2022 to go with for Ford, in my opinion, and this is, again, this is my opinion, is either Ford's factory choice, which is a Walbro.
A Walbro, yeah.
Walbro.
Like the carburetors.
Right, like a Walbro, like a weed eater carburetor brand fuel pump, which is probably what Ford used from the factory. They still made in the USA as far as I know.
The pumps are, yeah.
The pumps, the electric fuel pump. So you would look that up for your vehicle if you want a long-lasting fuel pump. Well, the other brand, and this is sketchy, but I have pulled one off of an auto parts shelf. Don't you know the part number off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's a Denso. It's a 951-0008.
Right. That part number in Denso would fit this vehicle. All gasoline models.
Both the back tank and the midship tank here.
Right. It fits the. Well, these vans don't come with the rear tank unless it's a dually box truck. But that Denso pump would fit that particular part number. Say that part number again.
951-0008.
Right. When pulling that pump off the shelf at the auto parts store, it says "Made in Japan" on the box. Now, if you're fooling with a newer Econoline, that pump may be made in China. But the one that we pulled was made in Japan. So just to let you know that. So your best bet would be to keep your factory assembly with your factory float system and rheostat for your fuel gauge, and go with a Denso pump or a Ford OEM replacement, which is
Walbros.
Which was right. So that's the do's and don'ts on the Ford midship gas tank, and they call this a 35-gallon midship gas tank, and it's for all of the Ford Econolines. They're all generically 35-gallon, whether they say 37 or less or whatever, unless you have a four-wheel drive that may cut it down to 30 gallons, which is a Quigley, which none of us can really afford unless we can afford $60,000 used. Yeah, probably because of the transfer case, they have to cut the tank short in the front, I think. But other than that, they're all 35 gallon, unless you have a box truck or a motorhome where you have a 55 gallon in the rear or a 35 gallon in the rear. So that still would use that same pump.
Should we say that we were able to? That tank had a little bit of damage at the bottom. That we were able to.
How did we repair that damage?
That we were able to push those dents
all
out
right.
a little bit.
Mounting depth. It's another important. 11.5 inches mounting depth. On an aftermarket tank, if you should choose to go in, the two things you need to know about it. The one I already told you about, the tray. You'll lose prime on a fuel pump when you get past a quarter of tank low, because of that tray is so shallow when you take off and accelerate. The other thing I wanted to tell you is the mounting surface on it is different than your Ford mounting surface. The mounting surface on this one comes with a different gasket. Here's a Ford gasket for a factory tank. That's a factory Ford gasket. And here's an aftermarket gasket. You can see why. Because the mounting is different. It's got a ring that's huge. Your Ford has these no ring, and you have these tits sticking out. So you need these extra notches here to go fit between that ring right there. So that's something you need to know when you're purchasing an aftermarket tank if you should decide to do this. The mounting depth on the tank when you're checking in a salvage yard is take a tape measure, go down in the bottom of the tank, and if you can read 11 inches from the lip down to the bottom of the plastic tray, and the plastic tray is not cracked, then you're in business. You can use it if it has a dent somewhere else. But if there's 99% of the time the dent will be at the bottom of this, because this is the lowest point of the tank, at the bottom of the square pan I'm going to show you in a minute. When it does, it pushes it up, and that fuel pump needs 11 inches to be a ½ inch off the bottom of the tank, for the strainer to be a ½ inch off the bottom of the tank. So 11 inches, you can get away with 10 3/4, even possibly 10 1/2.
But you'll be at the bottom.
But you will be at the very bottom. You will pick up every water, everything that comes in that tank. But you will get the maximum use out of the tank. We have repaired ours without any structural damage, luckily. We dropped the bottom of our pan using a jack and a device made out of a steel cage, more like a press and a jack, and a block of wood to be able to push the bottom of our tank down. You have to do that slow. You cannot beat on it. You will crack that ABS plastic in the bottom of the tank, or whatever that plastic's made out of, polymer, ABS, whatever. If you shock it with a hammer, you will break it.
If you push it slow with a jack and a piece of wood.
If you do that in a soft piece of wood or a piece of pine, you're fine. You can push it down. But you want to watch out for creases in the tank, because every one of them that have been beat up or damaged, they always get a crease right. Let me show you. They always get a crease right here, 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 and here.
Just want to make sure there's no holes there.
So ours was caved in here, 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 and here. We were able to get this, and it was pushed up in there. We were able to get it down to an acceptable 10 3/4, which puts our strainer right on the bottom, about an 1/8 inch from the bottom, and our float about an 1/8 inch from the bottom, or a little bit higher than that, so to speak. We were able to take a block of wood and pound this gas tank straight enough right here to get these creases out. What you don't want to do is crease it even worse, because then you'll cause a stress fracture, and then it'll crack over time with weight in it. But we took the one that was least damaged and repaired it. There's a part number on the bottom in case someone needs it for reference. So we were able to do that. And so what we did was take the lesser of 5 evils, and made a repair on it. And I still would trust this over that aftermarket Canadian tank, whether it was made in Canada, China, or wherever. Doesn't matter to me. Well, actually it does. That's my political preference, but there are other reasons for that. Stop that for a minute. So here's what I was talking about with the factory Ford tank. You can back up a bit. You can see the sealing ring is different. It's got these rivets sticking up, right? So it takes a different type of gasket for the factory Ford tank, and it's much stronger than the other tanks, right? So let's see, this is where we got damaged from a drive shaft thrown. You can see the bottom drive shaft bang across here, but as you can see, and it took it here too, I think. And I don't know how that got there, but anyway, there was no crease here, here, and here. But when you go shopping for a tank, you want to look for, especially on the Econolines, creases here, 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 and here. Because what it does is drops the truck. They drop the truck, or they pick it up with a forklift, and they bash this bottom in, and it bows the whole tank downward like that. Or it will leave the top alone and push the bottom up. You want to look out for that. Trust me, this is the fifth experience. The plastic tray, come see. Plastic tray is here. Can you see in there?
No.
Let me get a light. Let me get a light.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason this tray was dislodged is because it was hit from the side real hard by a drive shaft. But look how tall this tray is. You see how it's built? Much taller than the other tray. It's two trays in one, actually. And what it does is this. Watch yourself. See the trap door where it lets fuel in and then lets it back out? It has to go through a maze. Goes in, does a maze, then goes back around. That keeps you primed when you have low fuel in the tank. And here's the other thing. This little rivet down here at the bottom, which is really a concave in the tank. It's kind of sort of like a
teardrop
piece, yeah, teardrop piece of metal that holds your plastic down. So you don't want to get one with a dislodged plastic like this plastic tray, because that tray is non-removable. It was sealed in the tank when the tank was made, so you can't do anything with that. So look how high it comes up. Like I said, how high it comes up as opposed to that factory tank, right? I'm sorry, that aftermarket tank. So that would explain why gas splashes to the back, you lose prime, and stall in the middle of traffic and get hit by a freight train.